Hi everyone, welcome to another video on this channel, and this video will be the first video in a series called Man vs. Machine, where I'll be looking at games played in the 1990s and early 2000s between the top super GMs at the world at the time, specifically Gary Kasparov, Anand, and Vladimir Kramnik, between the rising engines at the time. Back then, engines as in use weren't used as much as they are today, and they were used more like how we would use a calculator in math, just to check someone's work. And of course, now most top players use them on every single position they can. But back then, they would rely on themselves and their coaches and seconds to provide ideas rather than engines. And that was at the fag end of the 1900s where engines started to really come into use. No, famously, Deep Blue played a match against Kasparov, and I thought it'd be a fun idea to look at these games, as they are very instructive, and the engines weren't as strong back then, and we got some exciting matches. So, without further ado, let's just get right to the games. And this is game one of a match, and Gary Kasparov opened with knight f3 with the white pieces. And Gary Kasparov decided to play this much more passive move compared to 1e4 or 1d4. In order to keep the game quiet. Remember, even then computers were extremely sharp, more sharp than a computer, sharp than a human, of course. And he would not have simple or tactical oversights that humans could be subject to. So this was an attempt to keep the game quiet with as few tactical strikes as possible. And computer strength back then wasn't necessarily in the area of positional play, so it's normal for Gary to try and steer the game in this direction. 1d5 is the main move here, and this response indicates no desire to copy white's actions. g3, fianchetto, and now bishop g4, and now this looks like a reverse Stromkowski of some sort. You know, Black's idea is to act the power of this white bishop by building a pawn fortress on the squares c6, d5, and e6. But before doing that, he wants to make sure his bishop is outside the pawn chain. Unlike in a traditional Queen's Gambit decline structure, where the bishop is usually back on c8, and it'll take some time to get out. And now, Kasparov responded with 1b3, and one of the most memorable games in Kasparov's career was the last game of the 1987 World Championship match against Anatoly Karpov. Despite the fact that he needed a win to preserve the title, he chose this rather passive double fianchetto, and it did give him a win. And he said that this specific opening setup would always provide winning chances for white until the last breath, and he stands by that statement even in this game. 97, and now the computer passes on a good opportunity to take on f3 and give doubled pawns. However, in the computer's eyes, this keeping the pair of bishops is more important than ruining the opponent's pawn structure, especially when f4 looks like a really good move here, as it controls this e5 square, and it gives white an open e-file to work with. And of course, in this game, in most cases, the machine's decision was correct. We have Kasparov played bishop b2, then Deep Blue responded with e6, bishop g2, knight gf6, white castled at this point, c6. Now Deep Blue has achieved the goal with this pawn chain, and this blunts the power of this bishop. However, this bishop is very strong as there are no pawns on the dark squares opposing it. Now d3 was played. The knight usually wants to go to d2 rather than obstruct the bishop. Bishop d6, knight b d2, black castles, h3, bishop h5, and now e3. And now again Kasparov proves that he does not want a violent confrontation by playing e3 instead of e4, which is considered the main theory in the king's Indian attack. H6, and just to give some room to the bishop if needed. Queen e1, and now queen a5. This is a very interesting sort of idea. Not really doing much, but the queen is it's flexible on the square, as it can always go back, and it just controls some space. a3, bishop c7, and a knight h4. And now black's hesitation in the last moves allows white to grab the initiative. Knight h4 is also a good way of proving that black's overprotective h7 to h6 here. A few moves back was not such a good idea. Now there's g3 to g4, sending the bishop back to g6, and where the knight captures it, getting both the bishop here and giving black doubled pawns, which is a combination you usually want to avoid. So g5, counter striking. Knight hf3. Again, Kasparov doesn't want some tactical confrontation. Now g4 is a move here, but again, and after g4, and then after takes, the position is very double-edged and sharp, especially with 4 pawns here, which is not usually a sight you see. So knight hf3 was preferred by Kasparov. e5, and now if black does not want to lose this game quickly, he has to close the position. The push of this he has to get counterplay in the position, and this push of g5, which was pretty much forced, weakened the king, and this e6 to e7 e5 move is not without problems, as we'll see in a few moves, but Deep Blue has no other choice. This bishop on b2 is super powerful here, and the black king will come under the line of fire. And an important thing to remember is when you are getting attacked, or you're in a slightly worse position, it's always good to have counterplay, and in this case, Deep Blue is searching for counterplay in the center. e4. Now Kasparov finally strikes in the center. Rook f8, and now this is one of the effects of black's last two moves. One of the effects of black's last two moves here is a complete weakening of this f5 square. So if a knight could get here, it would just be super powerful. Knight h2 of queen b6, and now Deep Blue discovered that one of the steps to white getting something on f5 is the removal of the rook on f1. Because you, for example, have to get if you want to get this knight, for example, to f5, you want to go f1, e3, and then f5. But of course, Deep Blue doesn't want that. So this means that the pawn on f2 suddenly loses most of its defenders. So Deep Blue started the hunt on this. Started attacking this pawn first by placing the queen on b6, and then he'll add the bishop to the diagonal. Queen c1, a5, rook e1, and now, as you can see, Kasparov is just shuffling his pieces so he can eventually get the knight to f5. Bishop d6, knight df1, d takes e4, d takes e4. And now, as you can see, the position is starting to open up, and it's going to become a bit more dangerous for Deep Blue, as you don't really want an unsafe king in an open position. Bishop c5, knight e3, rook a d8, knight hf1, and now both sides have achieved their ideal positions. Black's pieces are placed almost perfectly, but he still has that weak f5 square here, which is troubling him. If not for that weakness, he would be slightly better. And now white meanwhile is a little behind in development, especially with the passive queen and rook and knight, as well as the bishop. But the same f5 square compensates for it plentifully. The only thing he does need to solve is this f2 problem, which is which square, this f2 square is under siege. And they start to play knight f5 while the black bishop and queen are just aiming down the diagonal, and they're just enjoying an impressive supremacy. Yeah, but no one can stop white from preparing b3 to b4, for instance, and there are a lot of ideas. And he wants to chase the black bishop away, getting ready for getting ready for the arrival of the knight to f5. Now g4, and now this is the fatal error. And Kasparov went on to say after the match that the pawns had to stay back to defend the king, and he smiled during this move. And now after h takes g4, knight takes g4, f3, knight takes e3, knight takes e3, bishop e7, now king h1. This ensures that in the variations that follow, that there is no check that ruins everything. This happens in a lot of positions where you have a nice attack going, but while black can force a perpetual check or even a mate. And Kasparov obviously wanted to avoid this, and he plays king h1 to do so. Bishop g5, rook e2, a4, b4, now f5. And now deep blue tries to find another way of throwing the position in the air. And now after e takes e5, e4, and now f4. This move obviously sacrifices an exchange here on e2, and you will take on g5. But it does two very significant things and are extremely important for Kasparov. It keeps the e file tightly closed to stop deep blue from getting any counterplay, thus making the black extra rook to sit as a spectator for a while. Sorry. And it gets rid of this dark squared bishop, and now this dark squared bishop, white's dark squared bishop can play uncontested, and you can add to this the might of these pawns on the king side. And you realize white might have given up material, but he has got a lot in return. Bishop takes e2, and one interesting variation was bishop f4, gf4, and then bishop e2. But Kasparov pointed out in interview after the game, this opening of the g file is to white's favor because it allows the transfer of these pieces, the rook and the queen especially, to the g file to siege the black king. So bishop takes e2 is played directly. F takes g5, knight e5, g6, and now bishop f3. And now black finds this beautiful spot for the bishop. This is like a dream spot because if you take, then the knight comes into f1 and just dominates. So of course there is a lot to play for black. Bishop c3, queen b5, now queen f1. And now after queen b5 here, black threatens to come in the position, which white can ill afford. So it's better for white to trade queens and get out of danger, hoping the saying that the f and g pawns are enough to win. Queen takes f1, rook takes f1, h5, now king g1. Kasparov's decision not to take on e5, f3 was correct, as the analysis proved. For example, after bishop takes f3, he takes f3. Now bishop e5, rook e5, rook f3. The black has king g7, and now with this move, black gets a powerful blockade of these pawns and will pick them up eventually, and this makes things extremely difficult for white. So king g1 was as you could say maybe the move of the game. King f8, bishop h3, b5, king f2, king g7, and now white just continues crashing through, and in a short while it's all over for the computer. King h6, rook g1, h6 g4, bishop takes g4, bishop takes g4, knight takes g4, knight takes g4, rook takes g4, and now rook d5, and now f6, just shoving all the pawns towards promotion. Rook d1, and now g7, and there's really nothing stopping these pawns from promoting. And it was just a beautiful game from Kasparov playing against Deep Blue. And there were more games played in the match, and we will look at them in upcoming videos. I hope you enjoyed the game and the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to support my channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.